Well, to be two, capital G, here talking about another incredibly interesting deck that ended up topping the UK Nationals over the weekend. This deck was piloted by Kyle White, and he made it all the way to the top 16. Unfortunately, he did lose there. He had the really bad luck of running into Thomas Rose. I've been talking about Thomas Rose over the past couple of days. He's the one that had the magnificent, man, I guess you could call it Dante's Cat. That's what he named it, the Gallus Dante deck with, it was a Burning Abyss build with Lyta, Sekka, and Rescue Cat and all that other like crazy cheese and whatnot. He played him in the top 16, and I mean, on that day, nobody was beating Thomas. Thomas ended up winning the entire event. I wonder how far Kyle could have actually went if he had not had the misfortune of running into Kyle. But I want to talk about this Mermail deck and then really just the fate of Light of Sekka. I said this in my video yesterday. I believe that for the most part, man, and the commentators kind of they discussed this as well. Whenever a Yu-Gi-Oh card says draw 2, it seems like it's going to somehow find its way into the meta. I mean, you had Pot of Desires first, a card that said, get rid of a quarter of your deck and there's pretty much no way to get the cards back. You have cards way back when like Pot of Avarice that you couldn't even use unless you had 5 monsters in your graveyard. You have Card of Demise, which just has so many different drawbacks. And now you have Light of Sekka, which says you're not using spells or traps other than this card for the entirety of the duel for the most part, and people are still running this. And this is the second deck that actually end up topping, well, making very far, but topping the UK Nationals. And I feel like this is definitely going to be a trend rather than a blip. So anyways, this is a Mermail build, and there are definitely some things that I saw in here and I was like, okay, I definitely would expect that. But then there are some other things that I kind of feel are like the evolution of Mermail, and not even necessarily Kyle White's player preference. I just kind of feel like it's Mermail adapting to this format. Let me just say this. I felt like Mermail probably for like the last 6 months has been a relatively strong deck. Maybe not when Spiral was like really big, because it's kind of too much targeting in Mermail to be able to beat like a deck like Spiral, especially going second. They make Sleeper and there's really like no way to play around it unless you have like Gamma, which a lot of Mermail players would definitely side. But in general, I feel like Mermail is still a very viable deck. I mean, this deck is very similar to Burning Abyss in the sense that it can like adapt. Mermail are obviously like naturally suited to go second. They have tons of OTK potential. They do have removal out the wazoo. A lot of their cards float, so Mermail are pretty strong. I noticed certain things like the fact that if you really look at this deck, maybe you guys already noticed, there aren't really that many Mermail monsters in this deck. You have what, 2, 5, 6, 7? There's only 7 Mermail in the main deck. That's not really a lot. You usually think of Mermail as running a whole bunch of other ones. Maybe you could see some like Lin being dropped, but you guys remember the days of Zexal when Abyss Gun was like, it was one of the centerpieces and kind of the card that the entire deck revolved around. At one point, was she not semi-limited in the TCG? I feel like at one point she was definitely limited in the OCG. I know that in the TCG and the OCG, Mermail was kind of similar to like Necroz, where OCG did different hits than the TCG. But yeah, you don't really have that many Mermail cards. I kind of feel like also, as crazy as this might sound, I feel like Abyss Pike might not actually be needed in this deck. You'll notice that there is no Bahamut Shark, so I don't think he ever really expected to have a situation where he was going to summon, Abyss Pike and also have like Dragoons on the field at the same time. But I think it's just because there are so many better normal summons. A card that has worked its way back into Mermail and now is just vastly superior and really just an excellent card again is Genix Undyne. Some of you guys might be wondering about Genix Undyne, because this card used to be ridiculous during the Zexal era, and I think that a lot of people, myself included, thought that when Nephthybis came out, it was like, all right, well, that's the end of Genix Undyne. This card will never be able, you'll never see it again, because Nephthybis sends the Dragoons to the graveyard. It can send your monsters to the graveyard. You end up plussing like a billion. Also, this card had natural synergy with Megalo, because if you tributed it, you got your Dragoons back from the graveyard. So, and you had the 1-for-1 plays as well. But yeah, when Nephthybis came out, a lot of people thought that Genix Undyne was going to die, but now Genix Undyne it's kind of just as combo-licious as a card like Nephthybis. If you guys don't know one of the really good plays with this card, you can actually have Genix Undyne, and Before, you used to kind of just be able to send dragoons or heavy infantry or maybe a copy of marksman to get like a, you know, simple removal or get a plus or something like that. But now what you can actually do, you can send Crystron Rosnix to the graveyard. What that does, it allows you to banish it. You end up getting a token on the field. You turn that token into a Link Spider. Then you take your Genix controller. You end up special summoning your controller off the effect of Link Spider. And it's like, whoa, I just got 3 monsters on field off of a very simple normal summon. I can now convert those monsters into, you know, any of my nightmare cards. When when the new for hire monster comes out, that'll actually be a way of getting it on the field instantly, if I'm not mistaken, because controller is a machine. You'll also have your Genix Undyne, which is an Aqua, and then Link Spider is a Cyber. So if you want to do that, you want to contribute to the furry agenda, there is a way to do it in a Mermail for just 1 summon. But yeah, Genix Undyne not just has that play, but if you guys don't know about the Nimble engine and why it's in here, if you happen to send Nimble Angler straight from your deck to the graveyard, then Nimble Angler actually lets you summon 2 more Nimble monsters. Well, up to 2 Nimble monsters from your deck, except other copies of itself. And you know, you can get like Nimble Beaver, you can get Nimble Sunfish. So there are so many like ridiculous plays that you can do with Undyne where you end up getting 3 monsters on board. So yeah, Undyne is kind of really good in Mermail again. Now, one of the reasons that you're seeing the Nimble engine used in Mermail is because of the play I just talked about, where you can kind of send this straight from your deck with Undyne. But Nimble Angler, and the reason that this card is used more than the other ones, Sunfish is not really that good. It has to be destroyed to activate its effect. Beaver is really good because it's kind of like a really solid normal summon. But off Nimble Angler, if this card is sent from your hand or your deck to the graveyard, then you get those 2, you know, you get your 2 Nimble monsters straight from your deck to the field. And this can be done obviously so many ways in Mermail. You can send it from your deck with controller. If you happen to hard draw this, it's really not that big of a deal because your Mermail monsters, Abyssius, Megalo, you can just discard it from your hand. That'll activate its effect. Same thing goes with Swap Frog, which it's just another excellent outlet. Get Swap Frog on the field, and when you get your 2 Mermail monsters, you don't even have to commit to a normal summon. If for some reason you feel like you need negation, even though Mermail is kind of a go second deck, if you're ever forced to go first and you feel like, all right, I got a, you know, potential play to like stun my opponent, then obviously the potential of Totally Awesome comes into play. You know, all of these cards are level 2. In fact, so much of the Mermail, well, I don't even want to call this deck Mermail anymore. I meant to say that earlier. This is really like a water deck because there are only 7 Mermail, but so many of the monsters in this deck are actually level 2. Everything from the Frog Engine and Rodent Totem to obviously all your Nimble cards, heavy infantry. Speaking of the Atlanteans, this is something I never thought that I would see. There's an Atlantean that used to be super popular. Again, it used to be the dominant Atlantean, and it's not even in this deck. I'm talking about obviously Atlantean Marksman. I mean, that's just another, in my opinion, sign of the times, is the fact that like people aren't even running Marksman anymore. When you really think about it, it's like, okay, it kind of makes sense. If you're playing against the Pendulum deck, obviously Pendulums have become much more popular over the past few weeks or so. Well, Pendulums don't run any traps, so obviously Marksman's not going to do much against them. If you're running into like Trickstar or Sky Strikers, obviously expected to be the best deck, they don't really run any traps either. The only real trap that they run is Reincarnation. So even if your opponent did have Reincarnation set and you were able to blow it up because, I don't know, maybe you just don't have a hand, they can't even activate Reincarnation. Reincarnation works just as well from the graveyard as it does on the field. So what are you really hitting? You know what I mean? Any other time like the Trickstar player is going to set anything, chances are it's like Scapegoat or something that's already chainable. So I think Marksman has kind of like, it doesn't really have a home in the deck right now. It's really interesting how Genix Undyne was a card that people thought was going to be power creeped, or at least I thought it was going to be power creep. Now it's kind of worked its way back into the good graces, and Marksman, which was much better at times than heavy infantry, is now completely out of the deck. I mean, I think Marksman could be decent against Altergeist, but even in Altergeist, Manifestation, Protocol, Personal Spoofing, they're all completely chainable. So I don't even know how great it is against that matchup. When it comes to the hand traps, it does look a little weird. You guys are probably looking at the DD Crow and thinking, what the kappa, what's this guy doing? Does he not own multiple copies of Ash Blossom? In fact, he actually did only own the 1 copy of Ash Blossom. That's why he said that he ran just 1 Ash. That's why you also see DD Crow and Effect Veiler in the side deck. Yeah, the man doesn't own multiple copies of Ash. I actually think that even if he did have 3 Ashes, I still believe that Droll is like the dominant hand trap in this deck, because the mindset is with Mermail, you can kind of OTK your opponent anytime going second, especially, you know, these decks like Trickstar, if they're only going to put like, I don't know, the one Sky Striker Link monster on the field, well, I guess that would be a pure Sky Striker build, but if your opponent just has like a Lycoris and nothing else on the field, you know, Trickstars don't really put the biggest monsters on board after their first turn, like you can easily push through those. So I think the ideology is, yes, you do take a -1 with Joel and Locke, but if your opponent terraformings or they Candina or they activate any other thing that searches, like just go ahead, take the -1 and then just completely kill them, rather than trying to actually 1-for-1 whittle them down with something like Ash Blossom, where you may Ash a terraforming, then they activate Pot of Desires, and or you know, then it's just like, well, I drew the Candina anyways and I got where I needed to go. It's a very interesting deck. I actually like the Denko Sekkas in the side deck because, you know, decks like Altergeist exist, and I feel like this card is just significantly better against a deck like Altergeist, where an Altergeist player might have 2 or 3 chainable set cards, but if you just go main phase or inner main phase, then you summon Denko Sekka, like their opportunity to activate any of those cards to be able to use the multi-faker in their hand, like it's pretty much just all gone to hell in a handbasket. And Mermail have so many ways of special summoning with, you know, Abyss Megalo, Abyss Diaz. Obviously, if you have like Swap Frog in your hand and you discard your Nimble Angler, that's going to get you the, well, Swap Frog on board, but it also gets you like 2 more monsters. Like you can normal summon Denko Sekka, you know, special summon Swap Frog, discarding a Nimble Angler, and have totally awesome plus Denko Sekka. What is a deck like Altergeist going to do against that? They're not going to do anything but potentially lose. Much like Thomas Rose from yesterday's deck profile, he does actually have the potential of signing out the Light of Sekkas, in this case just for like more backer removal. Twin Twisters, Regeki, if he plays against a deck that's gonna, like, it's one of those break my board decks, might want to side in the Winged Dragon Rock Spear modes and a Regeki, or, you know, Regeki might actually just be used in those cases to bait out Trigate Wizards, because if you get rid of that card, then you might be able to just completely crack their field. I also think it was pretty interesting, and I think that he cited the Michizuchi for going first if he ever felt like he was going to be forced to go first, because there aren't any Megalo targets in this deck. Obviously, Megalo gets spells and traps, and I think the days of like Abyss Spear were way past that. But I mean, people used to run this one just because it adds damage to like potential pushes. If you have Megalo specifically, Megalo a lot of times can attack twice by tributing the Neft Abyss. Neft Abyss will get like Dragoons back from the graveyard. It's one of the easiest ways to OTK, and if you end up having Michizuchi, then you're getting like 1600 more damage off of the double attacks. But yeah, not even main decking it, or you know, really even running it in the main. I think that could kind of be, well, no, I think it's really because of, again, the Light of Sekka. So maybe you want to, you know, because it's a searchable card, there's no guarantee that you might get Light of Sekka. I wonder if you could actually use those two. I kind of feel like you might be able to get away with that. It's like your one spell card, because it is searchable and because it does help you OTK. But I just wanted to talk about this. And again, what do you guys think of these Light of Sekka decks that are popping up at UK Nationals that are doing really well? Do you guys feel like this is going to infiltrate the NAWCQ or the European Championship? Do you guys feel like these decks actually topping now, people might start looking at these and being like, maybe we should actually start playing these decks? Maybe there is something to the ideology that you don't really need that many spells and traps if you have hand traps and you have other effects that let you, you know, potentially end the duel quickly. Because what we saw about these two Light of Sekka decks is they're both kind of OTK predicated, and when Trickstars don't really put powerful monsters on the board turn 1, you can OTK easily through just a Candina or through a Lycoris or just through, you know, one Sky Striker monster. So whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.